collecting. So moving on to this session, which is a masterclass on collecting. And really, we're here to think about what does it take to become a super collector. And in this session, we're going to discuss the art of collecting watches with three of the best and most passionate collectors that I know. That's Sid Vasili, Michael Hickcox, and Antony Michaelson. So good morning, guys. Great to see you. So look,
Good morning.
before we get into the discussion, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and just tell us a bit about yourselves and tell us what watch you're wearing today. Let's start with Sid.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure and a delight to be here. My background is in business, in fintech, and so on and so forth from a global perspective. But I first got into watches in a big time when I was 21 years of age, when my wife gave me my first proper watch, and that was a Roman Mustang Indianapolis stainless steel watch, which I still have and cherish. But what I'm wearing today is my Gyro 1.
Wow. Amazing.
So that
Lovely.
it's not on my wrist because that to me is the pinnacle of watchmaking in terms of an 8-day movement and all sorts of good stuff like that. And of course, during my journey into watches, I ran into a couple of very, very fine individuals. Antony and Michaelson are great friends of mine.
Absolutely, Sid. Stop there. So,
Okay.
Antony, tell us about yourself. Antony.
Oh, sorry.
Introduce yourself.
Okay. So, thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for coming. I have a commercial background like Sid, although not as distinguished. I ran a small manufacturing company making hi-fi equipment. It was called Musical Fidelity. I retired 4 years ago. I sold out. So that's my background. My other passion is classical music, which I go listen to all the time. So my first watch was when I was about 22. Was a Bowman Mercier quartz watch, which was extremely elegant, very beautiful, which my daughter now has. What I'm wearing today is my beloved Bexy. Oops, hang on.
Oh,
which
lovely.
you probably would not have seen before. I can't.
No.
Okay, and
Super.
whether you can see anything, I don't know.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
It's something special, which I bought for my 60th birthday, and it's the only one like that in the world. And I wanted a watch which would be truly mine. And I feel that watchmaking is about that. If you can get it, if you can get a watch which is yours. And I think one of the problems with modern manufacturing is they make so many, and you see things on Watch Pro site where there's this extremely exotic, expensive watch, and there are 5 of them. Well, I don't know. It doesn't. That's not my idea. It's different to Sid's.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you, Antony. And what about you, Michael?
My name is Michael Hickcox. Thank you for having me. I'm in technology. I'm an American living in London. Today I have a watch that Antony helped me find and purchase.
It's lovely.
You can't really see it there very well, but it's an Urban Jurgensen reference to Perpetual Calendar. And of course, for Perpetual Calendars, we just had the geekiest day of the year when you hope that they successfully moved from February 28th to March 1st. And I'm happy to say mine did.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. So interesting. Urban Jurgensen's just been Kari Voutilainen's just gone in there, hasn't he, to take over as well.
Yeah. What I've heard is it was a customer of his that bought the company, and then Kari is taking over as CEO, and he has vertically integrated his operations. He's got soup to nuts now, case manufacturer, dial manufacturer, makes a lot of movements and movement components for others. So super exciting to see what he'll do with Urban Jurgensen. The Urban Jurgensen refounder, Peter Baumgartner, I think was his name, was Kari's mentor. And so there's already a special connection there.
I see. So Michael, why do you collect watches then? Where's your interest from?
Mental deficiency, first and foremost, I'm sure. When I was a teenager, during the summers, we had a lake house in in Vermont on the Canadian border, quite beautiful. And our neighbor collected watches. He's my godfather, second father to me, and every day I'd go over there when I was quite young. And I remember on the back of the Economist or in a newspaper or something, seeing a Patek Philippe ad, and that sparked my interest. And at age 10 or 11, and just haven't been able to shake it these last 40 years. Keep on buying that last watch, and it doesn't cure the hobby. It doesn't cure the drive.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about it, is that I think George Bamford made the point earlier, is that you don't need another watch. It's all about the want, isn't it? It's all about the chase as much as anything else. And I think Antony's point to say that you want something that's unique in a way that is you, and that kind of expresses your personality. I mean, is that something you look for specifically in what you're looking for, Antony, or is obviously that's a one-off you have there, but what do you love about collecting watches?
Oh dear. Obviously looking for them, researching them, looking at lots of images, and of course the people. I mean, I'm great friends with Michael and Sid and many others, and that is a big dimension to it. But I look for elegance in watches, and that's why Michael and I love the Urban Jurgensens, because they're really elegant and beautiful. And that has led to learning more about the mechanisms and looking at how they're made, looking at the anglage and perlage and all the other things that go to make it up, and the general aesthetic layout of it, and also the fascination with how it works. I went on a watchmaking course, or a watch introduction course, and we took apart a watch and put it back together again, which was fascinating. But I discovered that I had completely the wrong conception of how a watch really works. I had it exactly the wrong way around. So I've widened my knowledge a lot. I've met lots of people, and I've got several very beautiful and precious watches, and I'm very fortunate. Oh, one small thing: it's not price. Okay, I wear watches. I have a number of watches, but all of them I adore, and it is not price that defines how much I like them.
So it's not like an investment type situation.
No, I mean, unfortunately, everything's been taken over by the speculators. There's an awful lot of money coming into it from people who've got money from one way or the other, and that has definitely altered the market. I mean, in the same way as the art market was altered by this. And so the sort of small, relatively parochial enthusiasm which we had has been, I shouldn't say overrun, but it's been overtaken by, I'll call them civilians, coming in with big money who can bid up whatever they want because they have limitless funds. And so the watches which we used to buy and sell and trade and indulge ourselves in have suddenly become a different thing financially.
Because they're looking at it as an alternative investment.
Yes, type. And they're seeing it as an investment class of thing. And, well, I suppose, like it or not, we are in that way. I mean, Michael has several watches which he bought out of knowledge and passion for them, and suddenly they've become worth a great deal of money. And I'm sure it's the same for Sid. Of course, I've managed to pick second-rate brands, which I love but haven't appreciated. But it's a very,
yours have gone the other way. Okay, fair enough. Let's put that up.
Not true. I know that for a fact.
Of course not. So Sid, tell us about your passion. Where is that? Where does that drive you? What do you love about collecting watches?
Well, I think it's really a bit, and I hate to use a term like good drugs. I mean, once you're embroiled and embedded in the world of horology, you go deeper and deeper and deeper and look at significantly different complications and manufacturers and the independence and everything else. But I think what drives me more than anything else is the community. The community is so mindful of trying to maintain its independence and also its desire to move horology up to the pinnacle. And that's what really drives me, is the community. I've got lots of lovely watches. I'm like Antony and Michael. You can go bonkers and pay as Antony says, it's not about the money. You can pay enormous amounts of money for a beautiful work of art. And it really is a miniaturized, beautiful work of art. And that's what really drives me. Community, the miniaturization, the mechanical excellence that's built into these wonderful timepieces. And, I think that reflects everybody in our community. We're so passionate about people, our community, but also in the community of watchmakers and so on and so forth. And I think some of the larger brands have actually lost sight of what really matters. And what really matters is the collectors and the people, because they're so passionate about the art.
And so where does that kind of lead you to look at your research, when you're looking for the next purchase? Is it about talking to the community? Is it about that shared knowledge and just, understanding what, personal recommendation, I suppose, is the best way to, best form of advertising, isn't it?
I think it is. And the dynamics of the community is that everybody's researching at different levels. And so when you have this collective that gets together, and we can then talk at multiple levels, whether it's at the level of a swatch, and there's an enormous number of collectors of swatch watches, all the way up to the top end of town. And of course, we get most of our insights from the community. And I mean, the marketeers in the brands do this wonderful job, generate huge amount of information. Most of it is irrelevant. It's down to the piece and what the piece does for us, and Antony's got some wonderful pieces along with Michael and our other fellow collectors in our group. And the fact that we have these get-togethers on a regular basis and just talk nothing other than watches. There's politics and everything's out the window. We're only interested in the horological aspects of life, and that's a truly wonderful thing.
What about you, Antony? Have you got anything to add on that basis?
As ever, Sid has summarised it perfectly. I mean, I think you've nothing for anybody else to say. I think that, as he says, the community is really important. And the other thing is, it's not about flashing off how much money you've got. It's about the passion and the enthusiasm. And when we have our get-togethers, there are people who come along with, I'll call them relatively low, modestly priced watches, which have just as much credibility as the extremely expensive one, because they're conceived within their price range. And some of them are extremely beautiful. And it's an important thing, because I suppose with the elevating prices, many people are put off or frightened because, they can't spend this amount of money or that amount of money. It doesn't matter. There's some incredibly beautiful watches which you can get for £1,000 or £2,000, which are just as valid as some of my very expensive ones. They're just different.
And I suppose that's good advice if people are looking to start a collection, and starting on this journey. It is about those types of, accessible watches, isn't it? Not everyone can go out and afford a very expensive watch. But, what would you recommend, say, Michael, in terms of what people would, gravitate towards? How would they start that sort of process and journey?
Yeah, well, having collected for not quite 30 years, but coming up on it, I think in a lot of ways, there's never been a better time to be a collector than now. The amount of choice that's out there is just terrific. And, to Antony's point, there's something, whatever it is that resonates with you, there's an offering out there to address that. I think there's tremendous value in vintage. There's now certain pieces of vintage get hot at different times and the prices go crazy, but there's so many different categories and makers and vintage watches that there's always immense value to be found in different places. Personally, I've enjoyed this kind of revival or growth of the micro brands. Collecting, I've got quite a few watches from you can't see that in this light, Chrono Tokyo, Ming, Messina Lab. I think those are the three that I tend to collect, but there are, I don't know, a dozen other ones beyond that. There's great value. And, of course, if you want to come in and go straight to some of the what people call the hype brands, Paddock, Nautiluses, or AP, Rolex, Journe, great. There's plenty of room for you there too. It's a higher entry price than it used to be, but there's so much room in this hobby to find whatever it is you like, and there's so much more information available out there than ever before.
What's your views on manufacture movements versus completely bought in movements? I mean, but maybe that we're getting into too much detail, but there's sometimes people get really obsessed, the Lange & Zone sort of, versus another brand that's not doing so much. And actually often the beauty is in the movement. It's actually turn the watch over, it's much more interesting. But what do you think? Maybe Sid, you want to take that one?
I think it's very interesting because when you look at the range of movements that are available on the market, and if you take a grand manufacturer like Seiko, for instance, they've got some really wonderful movements, and I think it's really beauty's down to the beholder, and I think some of the independents have done exceptionally well with the dial designs and the case designs, but have decided to use a third-party movement purely on the basis they need to get to market as soon as possible. Number one, number two, the economics of making your own movement, in some instances, is just not sustainable, and even if you buy in a movement from a movement manufacturer, you can still have it finished to your own desires. And so in consequence, I think the fact that you can have a choice as a designer and a manufacturer of watches, that you can have the choice of in-house or external movements. The external movements have quality, they have history, they have reliability, they have a price point which is acceptable and allows you to actually set your market price at a level which becomes attractive to the consumer. So I don't think you actually have to be in-house for everything. I mean, if we take Patek, the 3940E is a wonderful grand complication watch. It's not a Patek movement; it's a Lemania movement. And so, in consequence, you can share, and you can utilize other movements in place. And it's no different to the Vacheron Patrimony Perpetual. Again, a wonderful watch that uses the Lemania movement. So I think there's a lot of mystery that surrounds this stuff, and I understand why that mystery needs to be there. But the stark reality is you can use an alternative manufacturer's movement and still have a superbly delicious watch. And Anthony, I think, can bear that out in a lot of ways also.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So let's move on to talk about what you haven't got in your collection that you'd like to have in your collection. Maybe Anthony, you want to start with that one.
Have we got time, Anthony? We got time?
A couple of minutes, guys.
It reminds me of an ancient Russian toast. And you toast to your wife, your girlfriend, and the one you have yet to meet. Right. And it's like that. The trouble is, I think we're very promiscuous in watches, at least.
Indeed.
And you're always looking at something. And I suppose there's a buying pattern. So we look at the websites and we look at each other's watches, and that it ignites the desire for whatever you've seen. And even though you've said stop, as I've said several times, many times, as Sid and Michael will bear me out, I haven't. So it's very, very silly. But having said that, what watch would I want? I honestly don't know. I mean, I think possibly
the next one,
which is permanently forever out of my reach, so forget that. And the thing I look for in watches particularly is the elegance and the beauty of the design, which I'm relatively shallow compared to Michael and Sid. I think the aesthetics are very important. And we look at Michael and my Jorgensen reference 2s, and they're extremely beautiful, but they're an outside mechanism, and the back is covered, or at least on ours it is, and the impression of the watch is just of overwhelming beauty and symmetry, and that's what I go for and I like. And so if I see another one in that vein, I'll be terribly tempted. So that's the situation.
Okay. What about you, Michael?
Well, I'll tell you, my most recent pickup was a couple of weeks ago. And oddly, in this environment, certain brands will become the target of a lot of attention. This sort of crowd mentality, as everyone looks at the same thing, and then there's so much dealer activity in the aftermarket nowadays that the dealers all kind of go to the same thing to hype. And one of those things has been hyped, but maybe I wanted to. There's some FOMO there, some fear of missing out. It was a brand called de Bethune, which makes maybe 200 watches a year. This one is a moon phase watch. I don't think you can see well, you can.
Yeah.
The finishing is just
Beautiful.
unbelievable. And having gotten it, I've become far more a fan of the brand and more obsessive about it than ever. This one I picked up is 44 millimeters. It's big for me, and so I think I'll be on the hunt now for a 42 millimeter version of the same watch, and maybe then I'll trade this one for that.
Okay, so you look at the trading type of, so you'll trade one for another watch. You don't necessarily just stockpile, for want of a better way of putting it.
Well, I almost every watch I've sold, I've regretted selling.
Right.
And especially in this environment, because when you sell it, that you can't necessarily get it back, or it might be. I've sold some great watches that are now 5 times what I sold it for. So I could get it back, but does anyone want to do that to themselves to pay that kind of premium for something you sold? Plus, it's all relative. There are so many other interesting things at decent prices. So the collection constantly evolves. If it's static, I think it's kind of boring. But no, I try not to sell. But with this, I feel at least I have a foothold in, and I have a de Bethune I can admire and appreciate. Is it my stopping point in collecting de Bethune? Probably not.
Interesting. What about you, Sid?
Well, as my fellow collectors have said, I mean, the market is wide and open. I haven't sold any watches. In fact, that's not true. I've sold 2 particular watches some time ago, and never regretted them. And it's a bit like with motor cars. You go along a journey with a watch and a motor car for a point in time, and then you decide that it's now time to move on. And I did that with an Ultraluxe a few years ago. Now, some people may say that's nuts, or was a nuts thing to do, but everything is wonderful in hindsight. But I think that you're in a situation, particularly with the second-hand market. I won't say the dealer grey market, because I discount that market absolutely and entirely. I'm not prepared to pay that type of premium. But I think if you look in the secondary market and you also look in the independence market, there's some wonderful works of art at that level that are accessible and very, very useful, and a very, very useful addition to the collection. One watch that I thought was really tremendous value was the Seiko Paddy diver watch, which is equally as good, I would suggest as some of the other top end brands, and fantastic value at £236. So you don't need to spend multiple thousands and hundreds of thousands of pounds on a great watch. You can balance your viewpoint and your budget in accordance with your needs and demands, and also, particularly today as markets are getting tighter and tighter in terms of supply.
Excuse me.
Yes, Anthony's just got his next new watch being delivered.
Yes, that's right.
This is fantastic. This is live, right?
This is live.
Oh, what a beautiful clock, Anthony. Well,
isn't it? I was going to ask him about that because obviously it doesn't just. It's not the stuff on the wrist, is it?
no.
No, I think you're right, Sid. You know, the fact is that you can buy, you know, a very well made, very beautiful mechanical watch for under, you know, maybe £300 to £500,
Indeed.
and it looks absolutely fantastic.
And
Is that
it
your
was-
new watch, Anthony? Is that the one you were expecting, or
Yes, yes, yes.
the new Urban Jurgensen's arrived?
It's a brown envelope, so I'm
Right,
rather
fine.
distracted for the moment.
No, we were just admiring your clock just while you
It's
got
gorgeous,
up. So,
isn't it?
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's I think it's 18th century French.
It's eight-day French clock, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a
Yes, very
very
good.
large size. I got it a long time ago, and it has a beautiful chime. So yeah, it's lovely.
Lovely, beautiful. So, guys, look, you know, we're coming to the end of the session. I think it's been really fascinating. Thank you for your, you know, brilliant insights into that. I mean, you know, what would you know, let's leave, you know, some thoughts for people who, you know, maybe collectors. They're looking for their next purchase, or they're thinking about starting a collection. You know, just one thing that you'd, you know, piece of advice you'd give to them. So, who wants to start? Maybe Michael, you can start.
Yeah, I'd say have patience. You know, certainly for us, I mean, having done this for so many decades, I mean, there are certainly watches that we all want that we don't have, and maybe we won't have. That's some of the fun of it. But these things can take a long time, and I don't think you should, you know, feel forced to you know, rush into something. I mean, maybe I didn't rush into Bethune necessarily. I've known them for years, but I think the other thing is research, and both because that will bring a sense of community, but once you really feel good about what you're purchasing, then I think you'll enjoy it that much more. And that, you know, we talk about community, we get together in person. We didn't for a couple of years, obviously, but we're starting to do that again. It doesn't have to be in person. There's so many online resources, whether it's Instagram or, you know, the old forums, Time Zone and Purist. There's so many different places you can go these days to do your homework.
Thank you. Do you tend to look for limited editions as well? Do you go for the series that, you know, there's only 100 or there's only, you know, 50 made or 200? Or is that something you consider, or is not really something you look at?
There's some false scarcity there. I mean, you know, Roger Dubuis, you know, used to make every edition in 28 because the Sultan of Brunei, that was his favorite number or something. And, you know, so they were forced to make really crap editions of 28 because the good designs they'd already done 28 of, and they sold no problem. And so I don't think limited edition for limited edition's sake.
For the sake of it, of course. Yeah, it's a fair point. What about you, Anthony? What would be your piece of advice?
Well, I would follow Michael's advice, which I haven't, is don't be impulsive and do things slowly. Because I've made yes, look, laughing. Yeah, I've made so many impulsive purchases. Look at it, which I really deeply regretted afterwards. And that's the other thing, is you're going to make mistakes, and there's no point having regrets. You made a mistake, and you just have to move on and do as Michael says, and research things more carefully and go into things with your eyes open, not with your emotions aroused. Let's put it that way. So be patient, don't have regrets, and I think, and don't follow the herd. You follow your own heart, and that's what matters. I just want to go back a bit, if I've got a minute, about beautiful watches. I saw on Chrono 24 an relatively unknown brand called Doxa. I'm sure Michael and Sid will know it. And I saw a watch which I would have thought was a Jurgensen, and it was beautiful. And I think it was £1,500, and it was indistinguishable. If somebody would have showed it to me and not told me the make, it would have been a Jurgensen, and it was exquisite, and it was under £2,000. So these things are possible, and it's worth exploring all the little byways. There's some extraordinary brands which are hardly known, and many of them made fabulous watches, and they're not fashionable. So what? Who cares about fashion? Anyway, that's what I've got to say.
Excellent. Very well put. Thank you. And what about you, Sid, to finish?
I don't want to sound boring and echo that my two fine friends thought, but they are absolutely right. But in my humble opinion, you should buy what you like. That's critical, and don't overextend yourself. If you tend to follow the market, you'll find yourself burning your fingers, and it's not a very comfortable thing to do. I would suggest take your time and then do your research thoroughly, just as Michael and Antony are suggesting. Look at independents. If you're not comfortable with independents, you want to go mainstream. Again, continue to do your research. Research the secondary market as well, but I'm not talking about the grey dealer market. I'm talking about other markets. Because if your desire is to have a Rolex, and you're content with a pre-loved, I think they call them nowadays. Is that right, Antony? Is it pre-loved?
Yes.
There are an enormous amount of choice out there. Just buyer beware and be careful about how you approach this marketplace. You know, because there are some shabby dealers out there, and shabby folks. So just take time, and and be very mindful of how you feel about the journey, the acquisition process, and more importantly, how it feels on your wrist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we've been in a challenging situation for a couple of years, and buying expensive items online. I mean, there are some pitfalls. So I think you're absolutely right. Be very sure who you're buying from, making sure of the provenance, making sure that if you're going pre-owned or pre-loved, it's got the right box, it's got the right papers, it's got the right history. So I think there's all those things that we should really be aware of. Obviously, buying new is a different. You're in a different place, but again, it's still you should ask the right questions, and I think that's important. And I think that's where the community comes into play, because absolutely when you're putting that kind of money into a product, you have to make sure it's right. So absolutely great advice. Thank you. Antony, did you want to just...
Yes, I did. I think Sid made a very profound point about being comfortable on the wrist. And I have something specific to add to that. A lot of straps, Michael knows all about this, are very heavily padded. And so they're not comfortable on the wrist. And so going to a specialist brand or looking for a strap which is comfortable and, in my view, unpadded and flexible, so it really hugs your wrist, is £100 or £200 extremely well spent. Parmigiani watches, for example, used to have these wonderful straps which just sort of seemed to caress your wrist, and it was a lovely feeling, rather than these heavily padded, stiff straps which sort of bind your wrist. Would you agree, Michael?
Absolutely, and I think a strap can completely change a watch. And I've had pieces that I've sent to sell and that they didn't sell, and then you get them back, you put a new strap on it, and it becomes your favorite watch.
Amazing.
Yeah,
it just changes the look, absolutely, and the feel is so important. So I think, guys, we'll end there. So thank you very much to Sid, Antony, and Michael. I think it was fascinating, and hopefully people will go away and be inspired to go and buy watches, but do it in the right way. So